Hello, this is your host, Dr. Daniel Knowles. Welcome to the Mile High Podcast. We are grateful to have you as a dedicated listener, and please make sure to hit subscribe so you are always dialed into Mile High Tick. Whether it be on YouTube or Stitcher or iTunes or any other channel, make sure you hit subscribe so you're always dialed in to what's going on in the chiropractic world. And also you're dialed into being at Mile High on higher ground with us in June of 2022. We look forward to seeing you there. You can get all the information about that at milehighchiro.org. Today, I am grateful to welcome to our podcast Dr. Amy Hayek, and I'm hoping I'm pronouncing it right, actually, now that I said it. She graduated from Iowa State with a BS in 86 and an MA in 87. She returned to veterinary school at CSU, Colorado State University, and graduated in 1998. And she had a certificate in veterinary acupuncture, and then went to state of Wisconsin Healing Oasis Wellness Center. She was certified American Veterinary Chiropractic Association. So this is going to be a great conversation about the importance of taking care of all kinds of species other than humans, to help them live an enhanced life with a clear nerve system. So Dr. Amy, thank you so much for joining us today.
Thank you so much, Dr. Knowles, for inviting me. I feel very honored to be, among the Mile High for sure.
Well, we're grateful to have you here. Can you tell us a little bit, let people get to know you personally a little bit. How did you find your way into this world of caring for animals and adjusting for animals?
Thanks for that question, because, some people can't quite figure out how you get from veterinary medicine to chiropractic with animals. And I have to say, I was that one vet student who I asked all the questions that just kind of didn't get answered in class. Like, why do we have this drug schedule? It doesn't make sense to me based on the immune system, things like that. And so as a result of that, some of my first continuing education out of vet school was searching for how to make some of that make sense, which is why I did acupuncture. And that didn't really answer those questions for me either. But once I got steered into animal chiropractic, all of a sudden, all of the things that I'd learned about the immune system and the way the body functions made sense. It all clicked and came together. Most veterinarians, when you say neurology, their eyes glaze over and they sort of look like the deer in the headlights, because neurology, as it's taught in veterinary school, is essentially you can find the lesion, but you can't do anything about it. So they are left with a lot of things that they feel, they just send to the specialist. And most of those neurology specialists do surgery. That's their tool.
Right.
So as a veterinarian, I was really grateful to be led in the direction of chiropractic, where I could learn more about the neurology and the nervous system and how it involves the environment around it. And the more I think about it and do things with chiropractic, the more I am learning that it's not a one-way street.
Got it.
The environmental stimulus on the body isn't just a one-way street. We communicate with that environment all day long. And animals teach me that as much as anything else, because they're pretty, I don't know, they're pretty cool to see interact with their environment.
Wow. And so then what's been some of the exciting things of delivering adjustments to animals?
Well, I have to say, so we train here at Animal Chiropractic Education Source, we train veterinarians and chiropractors to do animal chiropractic, which I know can be a little bit of a hot topic for some people on both sides of the coin.
Right.
And the American Veterinary Chiropractic Association, the founder of it was Sharon Willoughby. Sharon was a chiropractor and a veterinarian. She did both schools. And she developed the animal chiropractic training, the baseline of what we use. But she understood that veterinarians and chiropractors both come out of professional school, but they don't have enough to really understand that animal structure.
Right.
And so here at ACES, we do a lot of, we're always curious about stuff. And
Right.
sometimes we're so curious, we do accidental studies. And those accidental studies then become actual real studies. And one of them we did was on chickens.
Okay.
Yeah,
Tell
I
me
know.
about that.
People are like, chickens? So we discovered by accident one year, we raise our own chickens. We raise our own chickens. We get our own beef. We have our own apiary. So all of our sugar comes from bees. But so so sometimes when I say we live in utopia, we really kind of live where we don't, but we adjust our chickens when they come in. So we order chickens from a hatchery, we adjust them before they go into our brooder box, which is where they grow enough to feather out. So when the chicks come in, they're little 1-day-old chicks.
Got it.
And accidentally, my husband, Dr. O, who many people know, likes to make deals with the local feed store.
Okay.
And he walked in one day and they had some chicks. They were getting ready to mark down because the chicks had been there with them long enough. They needed to get them out of the store. And they were approximately the same age as the chicks we already had here at the ranch. So he
Right.
bought them for like $0.25 a piece, came from the same hatchery, were fed the same food, same organic food.
Mhm.
So we brought them home, put them in with our brooder chicks, and we had 2 different sized chicks.
Mhm.
The chicks that came from the feed store were half the size of the chicks that we had. And the only difference seemed to be the adjustment.
Okay.
And so
That's
that
exciting.
happened. It was. And so, and about a week later, he kind of did the same thing. And now we had 3 sizes of chicks because the chicks that came in the week before we had adjusted, and they were bigger than the new set of chicks that was approximately the same age. Well, fast forward, we, a year later, created that study. We bought a lot of chicks, and by a lot, I mean like 100.
Right.
We split the batch so that half of them were adjusted and half of them were not. And they were tagged, and every week they were weighed by someone who didn't know which chicks were which.
Okay.
And when that happened, about probably 6 weeks into the study, it's a blinded study. The scale doesn't know, the person who's weighing them doesn't know if the chick gets adjusted or not.
Right.
About 6 weeks in, the guy who was doing the weighing was starting to figure out which chicks had been adjusted because of the size difference and the maturity difference and all those things.
Right.
Throughout the study, the adjusted chicks grew faster. They went to market at 92 days, whereas the non-adjusted chicks went to market at 115 days. Big stretch of difference where we had to feed chickens longer. So one of the conclusions from the end, then we went on and did taste tests, and that study's been repeated by a 4-H group in Kansas, and they found the same information. And one of the outcomes of the study was also that chiropractically adjusted chickens taste better.
Right.
And in a test taste, in a side-by-side test taste.
Yeah.
So one of the kind of the questions or curiosity things that brings to mind is, or the thing that tells me is there's no way that there's a food shortage in this world. If we can produce chickens faster, cheaper, and better by feeding, and these chickens lived in the grass. They were not in a nice clean house with, no predators. They lived out in the pasture. They were protected at night, but they was a pretty harsh environment. So it wasn't as this, we were protecting them, but they grew faster and did better than the chickens that weren't adjusted. So what it brings to my mind is there should be no food shortages. If every baby got adjusted at birth, they would grow better. They would be able to survive, even if they ended up having to eat the junk food crap that comes off of the shelves in the store. You know, they'd still do better. And so, and then the other part of that is that organic food would be more accessible for more people because it'd be cheaper to raise.
Right. That's all so interesting and so amazing. You know, this is throughout this last 2 years, vaccinations have been a hot topic throughout COVID. They've all been a hot topic for much longer than 2 years, but it really heightened in the last 2 years. Do you have any thoughts about the fact that many chiropractors, we don't have to get into the COVID topic per se, but just in general, many chiropractors have a strong feeling about vaccinations, but many of them also have pets and get the vaccinations for their pets. That seems like an interesting choice. What are your thoughts about that?
Funny you should ask that. It just stymies me that a chiropractor would not vaccinate their child for health reasons and then would take their animal to go get vaccinated. And one of the things we see in our clinic, we have a clinic where we see patients as well. And we see vaccine injured animals regularly.
Oh, really?
All the time. One of the things that happens though is that we're all conditioned to take the animal to the vet and get their vaccines on a regular basis. We vaccinate animals more than we vaccinate people, even though they don't get as many different disease injections. We vaccinate them more frequently. You know, animals get vaccinated sometimes up to 4 times a year throughout their life.
That's a lot.
Yeah. And one of the things that I think people don't recognize is that that veterinarians were kind of the test pilots. All right.
Oh, really?
Yeah. For mandated vaccines.
Oh, really?
Yes. So, I mean, it goes back like 1920. In 1920, that was the first year that there were more people living in a city than there were living on the farm. More people had moved into the city and people began distancing themselves from that agrarian lifestyle. So the idea of, you know, making things more sanitary, because when you live in close quarters with other people in a city, having running hot water and more sanitation and all those things helped with health. Right. I mean, that's one of the things that solved a lot of the disease issues that we talk about these days. I mean, all those things, smallpox and measles and, dysentery and all that stuff. Right. Got better because the cities got more populated, but as the cities got cleaner, then those diseases went away. Right. But if you lived in the country, you didn't see those diseases as often because there wasn't the crowding. So that was kind of the first step. And then the next step was that as people went into the cities and were more exposed to these diseases and the idea of vaccines came out, it then got moved into the animal population. All right.
Can you say again the timing of all this?
So now we're talking about like the 50s, or late 40s, early 50s. Okay. There weren't that many animal vaccines up until recently either. So the initial idea, I know we always talk about Pasteur, but we've also all been exposed to things like the Disney movies. Old Yeller died of rabies.
Right.
John Steinbeck's Red Pony died of strangles.
Right.
You know, and that's the image and the idea that people who are now the larger population, those in the cities, we're seeing of animals. Okay.
Right.
We had this conversation the other day at the dinner table. What amazed me was what always kind of strikes me funny is I meet people every now and then who've never touched a horse.
Right.
I'm like, how did you survive?
Yeah.
I don't get it. That's just my own thing. But what then happens is that now we've got a larger population of people who are fearful of these animal diseases. And so we bring in, oh, this vaccine will solve that problem. So
Right.
rabies vaccine becomes, people say, oh, it's the law. It's not really the law. All right. There are municipalities that require or want your dog to have a rabies vaccine. The fact that they want it done every year is really just based on them giving you a little tag so that they know whose dog it is.
Right.
All right. It's not based on any science that says that if your dog doesn't get vaccinated every year, it's going to get rabies. As a matter of fact, there are studies out there that show that a dog holds a rabies titer sometimes for 15 years.
Mm.
So I'm not telling everybody to stop doing things that protect you and your dog. But if your dog, in most places, if your dog bites someone, the most they're going to get is 10 days quarantine.
Got it.
Now, there is the chance that the person that got bit could request that that dog be euthanized and tested for rabies. And that's the only way to test them, is to euthanize them and examine their brain.
Right.
So that's the fearful part of it, is
Right.
somebody could kill my dog. All right.
Right.
But so now you can see that progression coming. So then other animal diseases that they see as puppies and that grow into later years, we see more and more of them now, because what do animals eat? And this is another thing that mystifies me about chiropractors.
Okay.
What do chiropractors feed their dogs? Because that's the animal that most people have.
Right.
They feed them dog food. All right.
Yeah.
Most chiropractors don't eat at McDonald's every single meal. Is that fair to say?
Right. They may do it once in a while, even the healthiest of people, randomly
Sure.
here and there.
Yeah. I mean, sometimes you just gotta need food, right?
Or something that is masquerading as food.
Well, yeah. But
they do it rare. If they do, it's rare. It's not every meal.
Yeah.
Right.
Well, let's think about dog food. Kibble dog food comes in a bag. You bring it home. You paid $8 for a bag that's going to last all month. But you could set that dog food in a closet and forget about it for 2 or 3 years, and nothing will happen to it. It won't break down. It
Right.
won't turn to mush. It won't grow hair unless you get it wet. And yet so it's really hard for it to deteriorate, but you're willing to hand it to your dog and say, here, digest this. That just seems like such a cruel thing to ask a dog to do.
It really is. Yeah.
So, but it comes from part of the continual education that people have had about animals. You know, people didn't used to feed their dogs dog food. Dog food didn't really even exist until like the 60s or 50s, when they started producing it. So these dogs develop illnesses and issues, not just because they're getting vaccinated, but also because they're getting an inferior quality of food. And so the more inflamed they become, the more likely they are to become infected with distemper, parvo, Ehrlichia, all these other diseases that can be dangerous to them. And some of them can be dangerous to us.
Right.
So now you can see the progression. We have a larger population who live in the cities, who are removed from the soil and the animals that they used to work with. So they want to protect themselves. So they want things to be hygienic. So they want to feed their animals this food that appears to be simple and easy to use, but it also deteriorates the animal's health.
Right.
And so they want to do something to protect that health. So they're willing to inject toxins and carcinogens into their animal in an effort to keep them from getting the other things that they're susceptible to.
Mm-hmm. Well, it's also kind of sad. It's the parents giving their kids, the kids menu from a restaurant, right?
Yeah. Yeah.
And you shake your head like, how come that's the kids' fault? Well, they won't eat vegetables. And you're like, they won't eat vegetables, or you didn't hold a commitment to it,
Right.
I would totally agree into it, right?
I would completely agree.
Yeah.
Children will eat what you give them.
Right.
And
if they'll get hungry enough, they'll eat,
Mm-hmm.
They won't let themselves starve if that's what you decide to give them,
And yeah, exactly.
Right. And so is there now, animal chiropractic, how far reaching is it? So we just talked about starving children in kind of a joking way, but like, how are those connected?
So here's my connection. All right. It may be a long stretch for some people, but here's my thing. If we're adjusting animals so that they can do better, even though we're feeding them crunchy crap, if we were adjusting more children, and I know there are many of you who go out on missions and to countries that have more starving children, and you adjust those guys so they can do better, right?
Right.
If we can adjust chicks and make them more viable and more, vigorous, that was exactly the word that our statistician used. He said the adjusted chicks were more vigorous than the non-adjusted chickens. If we can do that with just chiropractic, can you imagine what that would do for these starving children? First of all, one of the reasons they're starving in many countries is not because there's not food, it's because there's a lack of transportation of, useful food. And because, man, I don't know if we want to go there, but in part because they're the dumping testing grounds for a lot of products. These people call them GMOs, but I call them Roundup Ready plants,
Right.
Plants that are ready for Monsanto's Roundup to be sprayed on them. And those plants actually cause, in the long haul, nutritional deficits in the people and the animals that eat them. So, and in the soil. And that's kind of the other part of animal chiropractic is we look at the soil. If you don't have viable bacteria in your soil, you can't grow viable food products to eat.
Right.
So whether you're vegetarian or not,
Right.
we're still affected by it.
Totally. So, and it's so amazing how those thought processes around the body, or people will do one thing with themselves or perhaps their kids, and do a different thing with their pets that they love. So much so. Now, you said something before we started this podcast about a movie we both love, which is the Princess Bride. I happen to love it. My wife doesn't love it, but I love that movie.
It's a great movie.
It's a funny one. And there's a line in there, he's just mostly dead. How does that relate to both veterinary chiropractic, animal chiropractic, as well as to real chiropractic?
Well, I like to think of it all as real chiropractic, but
well, I mean with humans. Yeah.
yeah, I know.
Yeah.
But here's how I take that line in particular, because we see a lot of patients in our clinic who they've been to the specialist and they've gotten the MRI and they've been to the, university, and nobody can find out what's wrong with them, but they still, aren't doing well. Maybe they're paralyzed. Maybe they just are sick. Maybe they just have diarrhea, but nobody can figure out what's wrong with them. And so that phrase for me relates to the fact that it's not that they're dying, it's that they're not communicating with their nervous system.
Right.
And so we have specific protocols that we follow for our animal chiropractic. For our paralyzed dogs, we have a specific protocol that we follow. We only adjust the atlas on those dogs for the first 10 days. And there's a reason for that. But the biggest reason is that we don't want to unleash so many waste products into that animal, because that's what's stored or stuck in that system,
right,
that we crash the animal. So we only adjust the atlas. If for people who are interested, you can find that information on our resources page on our website, because the protocol is all laid out. Mm-hmm. But even for animals who, it's either you or I euthanize them, happens more often than not, we're like, meh, we can adjust them. And we've got a lot of those animals still up and running around years later. Mm-hmm. And so for humans, I think it translates also into the idea that we see so many humans who they're not doing well. They have comorbidities, right? And all of those comorbidities are actually pushing them closer to the grave than any virus or illness they're going to catch. Sometimes that's just the straw. And with that chiropractic adjustment, they bound back. Mm-hmm. We're veterinarians, both of us, myself and my husband, but we see a chiropractor once a week. Mm-hmm. And if we're not feeling well, we go more often. We don't even have a regular doctor.
Right.
My son grew up with chiropractic. He was adjusted in the hospital, which sometimes I regret. I wish we'd have had him at home, but mm-hmm. that's too far gone. So that's kind of one of the things that always resonates in my head, is that birth is not a medical process. It's a traumatic event. And I think it warrants a chiropractic adjustment for every single one of them.
Right.
Including the animals.
Do you have a lot of people that bring animals at birth to you?
Yes.
Okay.
As a matter of fact, we see a lot of breeders. So we recommend most animals, especially, so we have there's another study. You want to hear about it?
Yeah, sure.
So one of our graduates is a veterinarian. She owns the largest dairy herd in the state of New York. They milk 10,000 cows. That's a lot of cows. Mm-hmm. And in order to be a milk cow, you have to have a baby. So she spends a lot of her day preg checking cows to see if they are pregnant. And we challenged her to adjust only the sacrum in those cows if they were not pregnant at the time of the check. Uh-huh. There have been studies done in humans. It was an endometriosis study where they found that women whose coccyx was adjusted cleared their endometriosis. So we challenged her with that. So in that study, she was adjusting like 1% of the cows that were open. Open is the term for they don't have a baby.
Right.
And what they found was that they came back into heat sooner. They got pregnant faster the second time. And they stopped the study. And they stopped the study because they couldn't afford to leave all the control cows unadjusted.
Right.
It cost too much. So they just adjust all of them. So anytime,
that's so interesting.
Anytime they find a cow that's not pregnant during their pregnancy check, they just adjust them. And all they're adjusting is the sacrum and the coccyx, because that's the part that helps to control that uterus and make it cleaner and a better environment for the calf.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm. Yeah. So interesting. Could you please share how people can find more about training to adjust animals? Because a lot of chiropractors do training, do adjust animals and care for them, and didn't really have any particular focus training with species other than humans. How can people learn more about that?
Well, they can find us at animalchiropracticeducation.com. And if you're interested in some of the studies and research, there we have a resources page where you can read about some of that. You can also find out more about Animal Chiropractic 101 at that same website, animalchiropracticeducation.com. And doctors can, the day you sign up is the day you start class. So there's no limit on when you can come to class. It totally is up to your schedule.
That's exciting. And how long a training period do people generally go for? I'm sure there's different, I don't know if certification is the right term, but different educational levels.
So with the Animal Chiropractic 101, that's our basic level. And that requires 240 hours of training, 129 online and 111 at the ranch here in Texas. And then we encourage them to sit for the AVCA exam, which is the American Veterinary Chiropractic exam. It's the closest they'll ever be to board certified in animal chiropractic. It also gives them, we also give them a good support structure. So we offer, once they've gone through that basic training, we offer continuing education. We offer doctor's rounds 2 or 3 times a month to share cases and experiences and things like that. And, you know, we want to make sure that they have a successful practice, because when there's an animal chiropractor in the community is healthier.
Right. Absolutely. Wow. I really want to thank you for taking your time to be with our community and share on this podcast. Is there any last things that you feel you'd like to share with chiropractors and chiropractic students and teams from around the world that are listening to this?
Oh, well, one of our goals is to have more animal chiropractors who are trained to adjust those food animals. And by food animals, I mean cows and pigs and chickens and goats and sheep.
Right.
For many reasons. And one of the biggest is that in many countries outside of the US, those animals play a bigger role in the daily lives of people. And it's one really great way to help those communities become healthier and more prosperous. I think that animal chiropractic could be a really good way to help see less poverty in the world, less hunger, and more health.
Well, and don't we want to see all of that as healthcare providers? Well, again, I want to thank you for caring for all kinds of species with spinal adjustments and giving them outstanding care, and really actually shed some light to different philosophies around this, as well as additionally having training available for chiropractors so they can be able to deliver outstanding care to those that they want to, in terms of whatever types of animals they'd like to care for. So I really want to appreciate you for doing that. And again, if you're listening to this, make sure that you hit subscribe. Make sure you get all the Mile High Tick you get each week with different episodes. We will put the links for you to be able to connect with Dr. Amy in the podcast notes. So you'll be able to grab those there with the message that goes along with this. And keep changing spines and lives and minds with chiropractic, and join us in June of 2022 for Chiropractic Unplugged, we just released our theme for Mile High 2022. It's going to be the Matrix. It's felt like a Matrix the last 2 years, for sure. And so thank you again, Dr. Amy, for all that you do.
Thank you so much for having me and inviting me. It's been a pleasure.
Have an outstanding day, everybody. Keep changing spines, lives, and minds with chiropractic.